What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And today we're going to be breaking down all sorts of interviews. We're going to read some comments. I'm going to recap some just myself. We're going to watch some on video together, listen to what all these people involved in Karen Read's second trial have to say about the result, the aftermath, and what it was like during. We're going to hear from two different jurors in interviews that we're going to break down. We're going to hear from Alan Jackson. We're going to hear about Proctor. We're going to hear about the McCabes and the Alberts and all the interviews you've sent me, maybe even more. Maybe I'm going to end up clipping some at the end of this that I get between the time we're recording this and the time it posts live, because there's so much more information coming out than I ever could have expected after this trial, which I got to just tell myself, stop expecting norm in this trial. Expect the unexpected here, because truly there's never been anything like this Karen Read saga at this point. So we're going to continue to break it down to you because so many of you guys have sent it to me, and I appreciate it so much when you send it to me. That lets me know all of you guys have the same questions. All of you want breakdowns on the same things. That makes my job easy. We're going to talk about all the things you're sending me. Let's get to it. And I've gotten multiple different things in different forms. So I'm just trying to, pick and choose kind of how we're going to present it to you. And this Jessica Machado was the first version of the information I got from juror number 11, Paula Prado, who is a trained lawyer in Brazil, doesn't have her law degree in America, I don't believe, based on everything I've seen and kind of read. There have been some video clips that have come out about her that have echoed a lot of the same sentiments that came out in Jessica Machado's interview. This was the first one I saw. This is the version we're going to break down and read through together and see what we can find out about what this juror, who, again, we heard there was a lawyer on the jury. I believe this is the lawyer they were speaking of. She's a mother of four. I don't believe she practices law in America right now. Again, some of this I'm reading between the lines. Some of it she said things to indicate such, but she understands the law, you would assume, better than just a layperson, even if it's different law from country to country, which it very clearly is. Let's listen to what she had to say about this case and being a juror. Let's start off with the most important question. Did you think Karen Read killed John O'Keefe, and when did you come to that conclusion? To be absolutely honest, this was her first statement here. On the first day of trial, as I observed Karen's demeanor in court, I was very suspicious. So this tells me a couple things. Number one, first impressions are hard to break. And we're all right when we say demeanor, what you look like, how you dress, your facial expressions of a client are very important. People think, oh, it's lawyers playing games. It's like, if you want to say it's lawyers playing games, but it's impossible for us as a society to not judge a book by its cover and immediately walk in and feel some type of way about somebody. And I don't blame Paula. I don't blame juror number 11. Everybody, if they're honest, would say the same thing. You make a conclusion, you jump to it as soon as you walk in on day one. You don't always stick to it. And good people and smart people and appropriate, logical people with more information can make the right decision. But she's admitting at first that made her have some kind of a reaction. It felt like she was hiding something. Her confidence gave off an impression of arrogance. She's picking all of this up as she's looking at a woman across the room who hasn't said a word. I would think her lawyers probably have something to do with that. She definitely is confident. And you can notice how the same actions in the beginning with no context can be a negative. Later, I bet all of these things were positive. And it's like, that's why she had confidence. That's why she was acting like that. Over time, I came to understand that I was looking at a woman who had already lost so much. So at first, when she didn't know anything about Karen Read, it was a negative. When the lawyers started to present what Karen Read has been going through, that negative became a positive. The fact that she was able to remain calm, composed, and actively involved in her own defense became something I admired. So something she looked down upon became something she respected and admired. It's really wild just in the first paragraph. I had doubts, of course. I was initially inclined to find her guilty, as again, most people are. Trained lawyer from Brazil, she still walks in thinking, well, she probably wouldn't have been arrested, wouldn't come to trial here, wouldn't be sitting in the defendant's chair if she was innocent, so she's probably guilty. I appreciate honesty out of jurors so much I can't even tell you, because again, it helps me learn, and it confirms. You got an uphill battle when you walk in there as a criminal defendant, even if you get a jury that ends up acquitting you on basically everything. Still an uphill battle. For the past 3 weeks or so, I became increasingly comfortable in saying she did not kill him. What is the last 3 weeks? The Commonwealth's experts and the defense's case in chief basically were the last 3 weeks. It's not good when your own experts start to turn the narrative against you. Did you feel the judge favored either side in this trial? I wouldn't say favored, but especially during the defense's case, I noticed a lot more of "I'll allow it" being said after objections from the defense. I understand that certain words or facts can't be introduced, and sometimes attorneys try to get something in by asking questions they know will be objected to. Still, Dr. Russell, for example, was hard to follow due to the constant sustained objections from the Commonwealth, which is hilarious because to me, it seemed like she had so much more leeway and was able to testify about so much more than she was the first trial. I wonder what this juror would have thought about her testimony in the first trial. Did you believe the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm were caused by a dog? Yes. How about that? She said, Dr. Russell was hard to follow, but it's probably because she was laser focused on Dr. Russell, and Dr. Russell convinced her these were actually from a dog. I actually have my own theory about the dog's role in the death. I don't see those injuries coming from a taillight at all. Plus, the lack of more injuries on his body made it really hard to believe a collision occurred. And this right here, folks, is basically the case. That's basically the case. From my perspective, I feel the same way. Did you know that ARCA witnesses were first contacted by the FBI? No. I only assumed it was the FBI after one of the witnesses before ARCA mentioned another agency. Could have been McCabe, right? Could have been Kerry Russell, maybe. But the another agency that came out, and we said that literally live, as we were doing the breakdowns day by day, when that came out, it becomes a lot easier they were much more careful the first trial. What did you think of the video clips of Karen speaking in those documentaries? I think she wanted to speak her truth without having to go on the stand. That sounds like a lawyer to me. That sounds like a lawyer to put that together. I don't know if all the jurors agreed with that. Those interviews gave her better control of the narrative. I also think it was a strategic move by her defense. Her alcohol use was an undeniable fact. It was better for her to address it herself. So number one, there were still a lot of people that were like, oh no, she wasn't drunk. They could have beat this, could have beat that. It was very smart for the lawyers on Karen's team to put OUI in, of course, but also to not see everything as a fire they had to put out, to not just hammer all this stuff, including the fact that she was maybe driving under the influence, to kind of give a little there. It adds to your credibility. If you can kind of admit, yes, okay, maybe she was driving and she shouldn't have, but did they prove it? That's fine. Because I think they would have lost credibility if they would have said she was stone cold sober, she was fine. They planted some doubt, but they didn't go overboard on it. They went overboard on reasonable doubt and the stuff that was truly shocking and horrible about this case. I think that was smart, and I think this juror felt like it added credibility to them, number one. Number two, if I was on the jury and I saw that, I would have been like, she was trying to avoid cross-examination. That would have been kind of a negative to me. I think it was obvious that the video clips were a negative to me. Seems like for her, it was kind of a positive in some sense and a negative in the OUI. Did you feel like convicting Karen of the OUI was the right thing, or did it feel like you had to convict her of something? This is the old split baby question. Great question by Machado. Absolutely not. The OUI was the only charge I strongly believe the Commonwealth proved. She said in several interviews, I was buzzed. I shouldn't have driven. My alertness wasn't there when it should have been. Once I determined that the videos were admissible, I couldn't ignore the charge. So number one, that's what me and my dad said. As the videos came, pretty much sinks her there, but maybe not anywhere else. Number two, once we determined that the videos were admissible, I couldn't ignore the charge. She's a lawyer. Did she have something to do with that question about the videos? And I can see this multiple ways. So number one, how does she not know the videos are admissible, right? Different countries, different laws, no big deal. But why did they ask? Did they ask because maybe we're jurors like her or other jurors saying, no, they've got to prove DUI without those videos. Do you think they did? Is that reasonable doubt? We can't consider those videos as evidence. Do you think some people were trying to make that argument? And that's why they asked. And once they determined they were admissible, then she was guilty. What witness did you trust the most? I trusted the forensic scientists from the MSP lab like Maureen Hartnett and Tess Chart. How about that? Those are the first two she mentioned. It's like the ones that clearly had no skin in the game. I trusted them. That's not abnormal, I would guess. They worked with what they were given, meaning if Proctor screwed up, it wasn't their fault. Dr. LaPosada and Isaac Wolf were also extremely knowledgeable and stated their findings truthfully. Not ARCA, not Aperture, not any of the witnesses that were maybe some of the real major witnesses. None of these witnesses would I call major witnesses. They were not the highlight of either side's case. La Posada was probably the closest to a major witness, but after Russell and with Arca, she was below them as far as I would say on the defense's importance list. And Wolf is just such a great case study for lawyers about how it's good for the Commonwealth to call somebody really strong, but as the defense, don't make him kick you in the stomach and make everybody realize how he's not really saying anything that's bad for you or that you disagree with. Really, really good job by the lawyers on both sides using somebody like Isaac Wolf as an expert. What witnesses did you trust the least? Officer Kelly Dever. Her behavior in court made me question whether it's safe for someone who acts like that to be carrying a gun among civilians. Bada bing, bada bang. I stand corrected. Happy to be corrected. I like to learn. I like to see where my blind spots are. And I felt myself sweating and cringing when Jackson was redirecting her and while Hank Brennan was crossing her. But hey, it worked with the jurors. And I think his summation, his closing, really brought that home. How hard was it for you to be part of the jury for so long? How were you able to do it every day? I have 4 young children under my care, and I work from home on a contract basis. I don't have a large workload because I'm their primary caregiver. It was fairly easy to manage their care with my husband and my extended family. I asked my father to help out as well. He came from Brazil to spend some time with us. Having this part taken care of, I was actually very happy to be a part of this process. So this is the juror, I believe, that has, I love true crime, or I'm a true crime follower in their social media profiles. And I see some people believing that's incredibly nefarious. Number one, I think that's going to be more common than you think going forward on juries. Number two, I don't think every lawyer is going to think that's a bad thing on either side, right? Because just because you're a true crime lover or follower doesn't mean you always end up on one side. Especially if you believe Proctor about the loud minority and the silent majority, right? Just because they follow this stuff doesn't mean they're on one side or the other. And here's the last part about this. The lawyers knew. I talked about this with Betero. We recorded on Thursday before any of this even came out. And I said, this is not like normal jury selection. Most of the time, jury selection takes a day. They had days to go back and check and double check and remove jurors that had already made it on their jury. None of this social media stuff should have been a surprise to either side. Now, if it was hidden and deleted, it might be a different story. I did not mind leaving the house every day to help the judge, as my kids would say. Once I got into the routine of going to the courthouse every day, I honestly felt like I was reliving my whole life as an attorney before I had kids. Makes sense why it was so easy for her. It made me think seriously about studying and learning more about American law, which tells you right there, she's not an American law expert, right? Probably still knows more generally about legal principles than a layperson, but maybe not. A layperson that's not a lawyer that's interested in American law, that's from America and grew up here, could very easily know more about it than she does. I don't know anything about Brazilian law, but maybe once I was explained it, I'd be like, okay, there are a lot of similarities. It wasn't a burden at all, except for deliberation day when I felt extremely stressed and overwhelmed by the weight of our responsibility. Sorry, I think I left out. Maybe even working in the legal field again, which again, it makes me think she doesn't work in the legal field, right? I'm a genius, right? What is something you would want everyone to know about this case or trial? I think I'd want to speak directly to the O'Keefe family. I was the juror who left the courtroom in tears. And it wasn't because justice has been served for Karen Reed, though I was happy for her and her family. I cried for Mrs. O'Keefe, Paul, and everyone in John's family. They did not get the justice they deserved. I understand they might not want to hear from any of us, but I want to make it clear that our duty was only to determine whether there was reasonable doubt. If there's any chance that Karen Reed was responsible for John's death, then the blame lies with the sloppy investigation that made it possible to connect her to his tragic passing. We did not fail the O'Keefes. The Commonwealth did. The police did. This is basically what I've been saying since I got into this case and listening to trial number 1. This is who they should point the finger at. This is who they should be frustrated at and angry at. Personally, I believe she's 100% innocent. But even for those jurors who still had doubts, none of us could say beyond a reasonable doubt that she did it. To Karen Reed supporters and advocates, please keep pressuring the DA. Keep standing against corruption. And above all, I hope we can still achieve justice for John O'Keefe. How about that? My guess is they're not going to be too happy about that. So she was a deliberating juror. And I believe Sleuthy Gootsy, somebody tagged me, either Sleuthy Gootsy sent this to me or somebody tagged me in it. A ton of people sent this to me. Thank you, everybody. Don't apologize for sending me this stuff. Yes, I have tons of DMs and messages and tags, but I love it because I try to not miss whatever information is coming. And like I said, I'll try to react to it as best I can. This one may end up getting clipped together as we go. I'm recording part in the morning. And maybe I'll record some more later, but this was juror number 17, who was an alternate. I believe this is the one that took a lot of notes, everybody said. And it was on DePetro is the one that got this interview. And I don't know if this is a synopsis or what. This was like the easiest form for me to follow. It was on the way Sleuthy Goosey posted it. I don't know if she screen grabbed it or what. I was not a deliberating juror, so I can't speak to what the other 12s were told. As for being an alternate, I have to confess in being very let down when Jim called my number. He called 3 other numbers before 17. I thought I was going to get through, but what can you do? It's the luck of the draw. 6 of us had to be alternates. Obviously bummed about it. Calling Jim, the clerk, Jim, is interesting to me as well. Very comfortable with him. How would you have voted? I would have voted not guilty for all charges except maybe OUI. And I think that's how probably a lot of them went in there. And I think that's kind of what I was saying too, is like, I'd probably vote guilty on OUI, but maybe I could be convinced there's reasonable doubt. And that's how a lot of them probably went in. And that's what a lot of the discussions seemed to have been around, was the OUI. I think she was drunk in the morning. They tested her in the AM, but that doesn't prove she was drunk when she left the bar, because she easily could have gone home and drank. So again, Alan Jackson in closing argument, just mentioning that. There's no evidence of it, but mentioning that argument, which you could infer based on when they took the test, right? And what everybody was saying about her around 12:30, that she was fine. She seemed fine to drive. John O'Keefe obviously thought she was fine to drive. That's a reasonable inference to make from that evidence. People said she was fine at 12:30. And the blood draw wasn't taken until much, much later. So who's to say they didn't disprove that she drank at night, right? But it was the other jurors, there was enough to overcome that. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't prove she was drunk when she left the bar, because easily she could have gone home and drank. Okay. How was Hank Brennan? Hank was very focused, very determined. He did a great job at crossing Sergeant Barrows, which we pointed out. As strong as Sergeant Barrows was on direct, it was a good cross, a very strong cross. He definitely tripped him up and got him confused on the pictures. But at times, Hank came across as just rude, saying "over here" to the witnesses was way over the line. And the thing with the holes in the back of the hoodie, that really hurt his credibility. I mean, I don't know if, generally the lawyers' coverages on this case and what people were talking about has been as spot on as it has with Karen Reed's case. Because it's exactly what we were talking about in our videos. And everybody that came on saying the same thing. Credibility issues. It seems obvious. Generally, they like lawyers. Like, what is the first thing she said? He's very focused, very determined. He did a great job at crossing Barrows. But man, some of the stuff he did really hurts his credibility. They want to like the lawyers and judges. I should say, the prosecutors and judges and cops, jurors usually want to like. Sometimes criminal defense lawyers can be an uphill battle. How was blue paint? Interesting. Honestly, my head was spinning. I thought it was a joke. I bet the 400,000 didn't help. I couldn't believe a forensic expert, in quotes, would do something so silly. All it did was demonstrate that if you intentionally put your bare skin against wet paint, the paint will transfer to your skin. I don't know how anyone could think that was a smart thing for the prosecution to show. Well, none of us did. None of us thought it was very smart. We all said the same exact thing. All it does is show, yeah, sure, okay, the arm could be, if you put it there, the same height as the taillight. But that's it. What was wrong with the case? There were some glaring holes for the prosecution, to name just a few. Hank kept portraying Karen Reed's statement at the scene as an admission, but that doesn't add up. If Karen admitted to killing a cop, why didn't any cops at the scene arrest her? Bada bing, bada bang. Or even detain her and question her, or put her in their reports. There's an officer down. There's a woman yelling her admission for emergency responders to hear, but by coincidence, not a single cop heard it or thought to write it down. That's odd, right? And they didn't call any of the cops that were at the scene. Why do you think that is? She didn't say that. I'm saying that. No consistent explanation for the injuries. No medical doctors would say that a car was involved. If he was on the lawn from 12:30 to 6, where was the frostbite? The state just ignored this. Why? I'm not a true crime guy. Oh, I think I may have been calling her a she. This juror a she. Sorry. I was getting that with the last one. This was a male. It's my bad. He. I'm not a true crime guy. I don't know about other murder trials, but maybe you do, John. Is it normal for the state to charge someone with this type of crime when their own medical examiner won't call it a homicide? Is it normal for the state to not call a main detective? Now consider, is it normal for both of those things to happen in the same trial? Common sense would suggest no way. That's massive doubt. I mean, I love the way the jurors went into this. They want to see, is this what happened? And they took all of the shenanigans, all the craziness in this trial. By the way, I haven't heard anybody mention a red Solo cup yet. That was just like not even top 10 craziest things about this case. What did the defense do well? The defense did a good job of establishing reasonable doubt, especially with Trooper Buchanan. Establishing reasonable doubt, folks, that was the big difference between trial 1 and 2. What did the defense? Okay, I kept asking myself, why are police officers so defensive and not just Buchanan? Who were the good witnesses? The scientists from ARCA were convincing. And when they were cross-examined, they didn't get defensive or snippy. Contrast with so many of the witnesses for the prosecution. Another defense theory and theme that worked so well. Brian Laughlin was maybe the most convincing. That's lucky, at least for me. I was born in Norwood when JFK was president and lived in Massachusetts my whole life. Relatable, right? I've shoveled more driveways than I care to remember. Haha. If there was a body laying on an inch or two of snow just off the road, there's no way the plow driver would miss it, right? Unless the plow guy was drunk or had skipped the route. So that's how he saw it. Every juror probably didn't see that the same, but that's how he saw it. Who were the bad witnesses? Jen McCabe. Too many things didn't make sense, especially she forgot who she called when the other agents asked her. Carrie Roberts, she kind of admitted to lying to the grand jury. A+ cross-examination there. She said she didn't do it on purpose, but still, it made me wonder, why is the state calling someone who lied at the grand jury? The Boston cop, Dever, she didn't want to answer anything. Haha. It's kind of funny in hindsight, but at the same time made me think, why is a policewoman so reluctant to say whether or not there were cameras at the police station? Again, almost every juror we've heard so far mentions Dever as a bad witness. Good job by the defense. Smart move by the defense. How were the Karen clips to you? I didn't give them much weight. The police didn't do anything with her contemporaneous statements that morning. So why would years later, in my opinion? Interesting. How do you think John died? I don't know. But what I do know is that the state could not back up their theory. For heck's sake, Hank even said something like, we don't know what happened. I believe we said, you don't ever want to say that as a prosecutor. That's never a good thing for you as a prosecutor. We don't know what happened means not guilty. But we have a good idea. I wrote that down at the time. I was like, yikes, we have a good idea? Is this guy in my head? The state needs more than just a good idea to convict for this crime, right? There was an ocean of reasonable doubt to me. None of the injuries added up with the state's suggestions. And I mean, I think the defense probably would have guessed a detail-oriented person taking a ton of notes was probably going to be good for them. Ends up being an alternate, though. If he had been drilled by the car, he should have had more injuries. If he was just clipped and spun around and stumbled and fell, then he wouldn't have fallen hard enough to crack his head open. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. Then that never reconciled to me. They just seemed to leave it open. Like maybe it was a combo of those strikes. That's exactly what Hank Brennan did. He wanted the jurors to go back there, create their own story and convict on that. They just seemed, like maybe it was a combo of these strikes. And then there's the marks on his arm. To me, extremely unlikely that they could have get such parallel lines in the chaos of a shattered taillight. But most of all, how could there be no trace of John on any of the pieces? Dozens of taillight pieces scratched, gouged skin, yet not a single taillight piece had any human material on it. More doubt. It honestly would have been more believable if Karen said, or if they said Karen got out of the car with a hammer and attacked John. The claw parts of the hammer could have made those marks, and the ballpark could crack his skull. Lexus data backing up. I wasn't sure what weight to give the Lexus data. Example, the 75% accelerator pedal. Interesting, yes, but there was no definitive time linked to it because conflicting theories of time drift. And speaking of drift, Mr. Burgess' graduation date drifted quite a bit, man. That was tough to watch. Thank you, sir. We agree. That was a tough watch. And I think he kind of explained it perfectly. I don't really know what to do with all this, but man, I can't just take what this guy's saying as the truth. Can't do that. Cell phone temperature for John's phone. The state essentially said, maybe it was under John's shoulder outside all night. The defense said, maybe it was in a garage. Competing maybes equal doubt. And you notice how they felt the garage more than the basement this time? Hank said she backed up, hit him, and left. Why was he wrong? We never got any real evidence of a collision. Again, no medical doctor said the injuries were consistent with the vehicle strike. I don't know why we're all so surprised that they're all so consistent on something that was so obvious to all of us watching, but I still feel a little surprised. Maybe it's because of the last juror in some of those interviews. And I mean, how different can juries be, right? Yes, Hank said she hit him. Okay, but Hank's statements aren't evidence. Lawyers say a lot of things. Can't take what either side's lawyers say at face value. You can't take them at face value. I don't know if we'd love that or agree with that as lawyers, but hey, at least he was even-handed in how he did that with either side. What did you think of Dr. Wolf, the brain surgeon? Super accomplished guy, very slick. Made me think of Rat Pack cavorting in Miami. Didn't help prove a collision, though. Really smart, but what did he actually prove? Really smart, but what did he actually prove? Man, these jurors are really, really impressive to me. You know who else was impressive to me? Alan Jackson. He went on Howie Carr's show, gave an interview here, and we're going to take a listen to it together.
Welcome to the Howie Carr Show, 844-500-4242. Just about 23 hours ago, Karen Reed was acquitted of all charges found Nixon, who did such. What did you ever, were you ever in any doubt, or how much doubt were you in as to whether or not you could get a fair trial in Norfolk County the second time around?
Oh, I had, how much doubt was I? I was in enormous doubt. I mean, I never doubted the evidence. I never doubted her innocence. I never doubted Karen's, the just result should be that Karen walks out of that courtroom in the front door, through the front door, not the back. But did I doubt whether or not I could get a fair trial? About every single minute of every single day. Yeah. I doubted it.
And so for anybody wondering if he's going to comment on what he thinks about Judge Cannoni and how this trial went, he's not going to hold back.
Significantly.
I
think we may be the only duo, lawyer and client, who has gotten back-to-back acquittals on murder charges. I mean, we got back-to-back acquittals. When is that ever happened?
Double jeopardy. And I thought you were going for triple jeopardy yesterday when they brought back they said, oh, we don't have a verdict after all. I mean, you're going into the record books. You got two murder acquittals here in a row.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever meet another lawyer who can claim that. Yeah, this team has gone through the gauntlet. What
was it like having basically the judge tied your hands, the defense's hands behind your backs, didn't she? What was that? What was that like?
Things, it was difficult. I mean, that was the challenge, right? So Hank Brennan came on as this, sort of self-proclaimed stalwart of justice. We're going to make sure that Karen Reed gets a fair trial. That was just lip service. It was anything but that. The Commonwealth.
How about that? What's he think about Hank Brennan and the comments he made and whether or not he was going to make sure Karen Reed got a fair trial? I think if I remember correctly, back when Hank Brennan was saying things like that, Alan Jackson was like, good, I hope that that's true. And I hope that that actually does happen. And I'll take him for his word. Now, after the fact, he feels pretty sure it was just lip service.
Had a theme and a theory going to this case that they did not want the jurors, in my view, they did not want the jurors to actually hear the evidence. They had no interest in having the jurors presented with the truth and the evidence on both sides, even playing field. Everything they did strategically was to try to hide evidence, try to hide witnesses, try to hide experts from the jurors.
I don't know how Hank Brennan would even argue that. He very clearly made intentional decisions to not call witnesses, not put on certain evidence, and try to block the defense from putting on obvious evidence that was admissible that any defense should be able to put on in a trial like this.
Filed motion after motion after motion. Well, that's one thing. I mean, I can handle a prosecutor. I can beat most prosecutors with my hands tied behind my back. I know evidence very, very, very well.
Remember we were talking about the humility of Alan Jackson yesterday? He's like, I can beat most prosecutors with my hands tied behind my back. That was funny.
Problem is, when the judge is on the Commonwealth side and tends to lean toward the Commonwealth, that makes life very difficult. And I've got example after example after example of the Judge Cannoni making very bizarre rulings that just did benefit the Commonwealth over the defense. And they're myriad.
Yeah, we would get people would be texting in and saying, why doesn't Jackson object to this or that? And I said, after, he's been overruled, his objection's been overruled about 1 million times in a row. I mean, he's just pissing off the jury if he keeps objecting because he knows what's going to happen, right?
So the court is a theater, right? There is a theater to courtroom advocacy. And part of it is.
So a lot of the people calling Alan Jackson the Hollywood attorney, it's not just because he's from Hollywood. This is how he views a trial. And he's not wrong. Theater is a viewing experience for the jury, right? And that's what a trial is. That's what a trial is. Now, you don't want to make things fake or lie or hide things like he's saying, like he's accusing Hank Brennan of doing and making it fake. You want it to be the real story, the real evidence in the jury to make a real decision, but he'll explain what he means by theater.
is playing to the audience, and the audience is not the public at large. The audience is not the bloggers. The audience is 12 folks, or in this case, 18 folks sitting in a jury box. I had to play the odds. There was a witness I took, Howie. This is still just shocking to me. There was a witness that I took on direct examination. It's direct, and it's an expert, and just allowed to lead experts. In every state in the union, you can have moments where you lead experts. Every question I asked was objected to by Hank Brennan, and 100% of his objections were sustained. I've never seen that in 30 years of practice. Literally, I think it was 49 objections and 49 sustained objections by Hank Brennan and the judge. Talk about trying to keep the...
I wonder if the people following that online and tracking that online, if that's the information he's using. I'd be interested to hear that, or if he had somebody tracking that, or if he just felt it in the moment. But he is right that you're allowed to lead on background, and you are definitely allowed to lead experts through certain things, especially to make it go quicker, or if everybody knows and we have the report, if the report's in evidence, especially. I do think that both lawyers led a lot, but specifically with experts, he is right. Usually you're given a little more leeway than he was, or a lot more leeway than he was given.
The information from the jurors, it's not like I was abusing my position trying to get information in that was not relevant. I just had to ask the question 17 different times in 5 different directions to get the information in front of the jury. I've never had a situation where the judge sustains every single objection by the prosecution. That's never happened. Statistically, it's impossible.
How about the fact when Brennan would kind of like, drift off, and you would ask a tough question, and she would ask Brennan, objection, counselor? I've never seen that in court. Have you?
No, never. It certainly seemed like the Judge Cannoni had an idea of what she thought should be presented to the jury and how she thought it should be presented to the jury, instead of just being, calling the balls and strikes. That's what she's there for. Her job is very, very it's simple. She is a gatekeeper of the evidence, for sure. Absolutely. So you don't want to allow abuses on either side to occur in your courtroom, but you allow the lawyers to try the cases. You allow the lawyers to direct examine the witnesses or cross-examine the witnesses. You allow the evidence to come in before the jury, because ultimately the jury is the trier of fact, not the judge. The most important folks in the room are the jurors. So it struck me after a while, and it struck me in trial number 1. She did the same thing. It was just, in my view, abusive of the process, not allowing the system to just work. Let the witnesses testify, let the evidence come in, and let the jurors weigh the evidence, and then let the advocates argue about the weight of the evidence. That's a trial in and of itself. It's not difficult.
What would if you could speak directly to Judge Cannone, what would you say to her in criticism of what she did?
Well, I have to be careful. I am an officer of the court in every jurisdiction in which I'm pro hoc, and I can imagine I may be back here in Mass.
So he's being very careful, very, very careful about what he says, how far he's going to go. He'll definitely take some shots, but there are lines. Even Alan Jackson's like, there are lines. I got to be careful here.
Massachusetts, again, I doubt I'll be in front of Judge Cannoni, but my suggestion would be, just do better. Don't try to put your thumb on the scale. No judge should ever try to put your thumb on the scale. Let the evidence get before the trier of fact in a fair and, above all else, an impartial way. I did not feel this was an impartial judge. I just didn't. And I don't think anybody who's watching would argue with that.
What about the district attorney, Michael Morrissey, who got 3,000 pages of evidence from the FBI?
Yeah, I mean, from the jump, it was so obvious she's leaning to the prosecution side. As the trial went on, more and more and more and more and more with the objections. She made some good decisions. As you're in there, feeling like a defense attorney, people have asked me, would you like to do this? Would you like to try this case in front of this judge, or try a case in front of this judge? Now, this case would have been really fun to try as a criminal defense attorney, because there's just so much there. Me and Bettero have talked about that about 1,000 times, and he was this close to doing it. But in front of this judge, it'd be miserable. You would just feel like it's the prosecutor and the judge against you. And I felt like that in trials, not so much to this extent, but it's really frustrating to feel like it's a hard case. It's hard to win as a criminal defense attorney. And then, like they're saying, with hands tied behind your back, I mean, Alan Jackson said he can beat most prosecutors like that, but it can be very difficult.
Pretty much conclusively proving that your client did not strike John O'Keefe. And yet he went out and spent close to $500,000 to hire his own experts. What would you say to Michael Morrissey, the district attorney?
For Michael Morrissey, I have a lot more to say than I have to say to Judge Cannoni. For Michael Morrissey, the overall.
See, I mean, that's exactly what I've said from the jump. Exactly what I've said from the jump. it's much more on Morrissey and the cops than it is on Cannoni. And so when he said that, I was like, oh, that makes me feel better. Thank you. I mean, Cannoni be annoying. A lot of judges are annoying. She's on the echelon of as leaning as far against you as a defense attorney, especially as a public. She's a former public defender, kind of is like weird or shocking to you. But the real unimaginable thing here is Morrissey and law enforcement and how this case even got here.
Arching comment is do better. Do better, sir. You are in the job of seeking justice. You're not in the job of winning cases. And that's what it seemed like he was doing. Not seemed like, that's all he was doing. And that's what Hank Brennan was doing. And that's what Laura McLaughlin was doing, who was writing all the papers, the abusive process, trying to keep all of our witnesses out of the courtroom. Literally,
that I thought was kind of funny because she wasn't really a main character in all of this, but she was doing a lot of the document drafting, and he took a shot at her with how and what documents she was drafting.
That's hundreds and hundreds of hours filing motions, trying to keep our witnesses away from the jurors. Ultimately, we were able to overcome it. But it was not easy, Howie. I got to tell you, this is one of the most challenging. This is the most challenging case I've ever tried in my life. And we didn't win because of the process.
And that's saying something because he's practiced for a long time and had a lot of high profile cases and probably a lot of difficult cases. So that is saying something. I'm not surprised at all that he said that.
We won despite the process that was put in place in that Dedham courtroom. It was a travesty, in my view, an absolute travesty.
What was the worst thing that they kept out? The butt dials, the FBI, the solicitation of a bribe?
You just hit the nail right on the head. The FBI. How can you possibly defraud a jury by saying, okay, defense?
By the way, let me know where you've heard this before. The exact thing he's going to highlight here. It's just, it's awesome to hear this stuff and how they're thinking about it and how they're attacking it, because the way any lawyer knows this is learning from either your own experiences or from other lawyers or from talking to people. And I couldn't agree more, obviously. It's exactly what I was saying at the time when Hank Brennan was allowed to do this robust cross and dance all around it and use it as a sword, but also as a shield, thanks to Judge Cannoni.
Saying, okay, defense, you're not allowed to mention the fact that ARCA was hired by an independent agency, the FBI and the Department of Justice, the DOJ, and at the same time allow the prosecution to get up and cross-examine the very witnesses that were hired by the FBI and call them your employers. Are you kidding? That was not a mistake. Hank Brennan did that absolutely on purpose, and he did it because he knew he was going to get a very favorable call by the judge. We objected over and over. We said he opened the door. This is perpetrating a fraud on the jury. This was not their employer. Nowhere close to being their employer. These witnesses' employer is ARCA. Yet when we went to sidebar, nope, you can't mention the FBI. And the Commonwealth was still able to perpetrate this just abject fraud on the jury. Now, thank God, the jurors were smart enough that they did not allow that to affect their ultimate judgment. But that's the kind of abuse that should not ever happen in an American courtroom.
Did you think that Brennan was going to seek jail time for the drunk driving?
No, I didn't. I told Karen going into the verdict watch, if you will, I sort of have the sound of the Jeopardy theme in my head when I go into verdict watch.
It's miserable. But he was not surprised. Okay, so he wasn't surprised that Hank Brennan didn't seek jail time. But is he going to give Hank Brennan any flowers for that? For just doing the bare minimum right thing? Kind of like I did. I don't know why I'm surprised, but I was a little surprised and happy Brennan did it the way he did. Let's see if Jackson gives him a compliment for doing that.
It's brutal. It's friggin' brutal. But no, I told her over and over, look, there is a very good possibility that there's going to be an OUI conviction. Very good possibility. And that was, in some respects, that was by design. And
you hear that? Very good chance it could be an OUI conviction. And in some respects, that was by design, which is exactly what we said at the time. Genius move. Almost turned ugly if they would have hung on that. But hey, what is it? The victors write history. History is written by the victors, something like that.
I can explain that at a later time. But there was, in my view, no way that Judge Cannoni could actually impose some sort of draconian jail time. Nobody gets jail time in Massachusetts for first-time DUI with perfect driving record. And that's exactly how Karen came to. She's not allowed under Massachusetts statute. She is not allowed to consider acquitted charges. And I knew, in my heart of hearts, we were going to acquit her of everything having to do with with John O'Keefe with an SUV. It just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And there was no way they could prove it happened. So she was going to be standing before the judge with a very clean record, first-time DUI, with no real information, true information about her BAC at the time of the driving. So I was not concerned that she was going to go to jail. Karen was very concerned, obviously. Anybody who's in that position thinks the guillotine is hanging over their head. Obviously, she's concerned, but I wasn't. And good for Hank for not seeking it, and good for Judge Cannoni for not making an issue of it. She was given the
There you go. Right? Good for them. Good for them. Good on them for doing the right thing. It's about, I think that's as big of a compliment as they're going to get from Alan Jackson.
Lowest level program that everybody gets for a first-time DUI, and that's exactly what should have happened.
Is the FBI going to get involved in this, do you think?
I wish they would. I thought it was.
So here's my note here. He says, I wish the FBI would get involved. Okay. Now, what he's about to finish with. Does this make you think that there's collusion between the defense team and the FBI? Listen to what Alan Jackson's about to say. Does it sound like, oh, the FBI is just working with the defense here?
I thought it was sort of a sad day for the justice system when it was announced in court that, and Mr. Brennan took great pleasure in announcing in court that the FBI investigation was quote unquote closed. I've never heard of that, Howie. In part, and keep in mind, I don't know if your listeners know it, but I was a prosecutor for 18 years before I ever represented a defendant, and I did it at some of the highest levels. I've never heard of an investigative agency announcing to the targets the investigation is closed. That has never happened. So I still have questions about that, but it is what it is. Mr. Brennan announced it in court. I took him at his word. It was to me, it was a punt on the part of the FBI. I think there's plenty of information for them, plenty of evidence for them to investigate, and I think they should.
He thinks they punted. He's never heard them announcing that that the investigation's over to a target, and he did it to them. Why? And there's so much information. Why would you punt on that? That does not seem like somebody who's, bending the knee and working hand in hand with the FBI. It sounds like somebody who's saying, do the right thing for justice. That was a sad day for justice when you stopped investigating. Do the right thing, finish the investigation, go get the bad guys. That's what you're supposed to do.
I think that if they're doing their job, they should look real close into the culture of the Massachusetts State Police, a culture that can foster somebody as dangerous as Michael Proctor and his
a cancer. I remember that's a memorable line in your opening statement. I remember that. I want to play you one cut before I let you go here from Michael Proctor. What did you make of that? Have you watched that yet?
I haven't. I couldn't. I was in a celebratory mood yesterday, so I couldn't bring myself to watch Michael Proctor do anything. I suppose I'll have to do it now. Now you've shamed me into it. I got to watch it.
I got to play you one cut though.
I
got to play you one cut as he goes over his investigative chops here. Cut 9.
Sure.
Is there any part of the actual investigation that you would do over?
Because it's blowing up into this crazy so-called conspiracy, maybe I could have avoided it by, looking at other people's cars just to say we did it. There's some witnesses. Maybe we could have interviewed a little sooner.
Just to say we did it? I could have looked at some stuff to say we did it and maybe interview people a little sooner. Just wait. As soon as we're done with this Jackson interview, we're going to be recapping that Proctor interview, and I'm going to give you some more of his quotables from that, but let's hear what Jackson has to say about it.
But overall, myself and every detective in that office worked this case like we always do. So I wouldn't change anything.
Nothing.
No.
We work this case just like we always do.
That is the scariest phrase I think I've ever heard from a detective. Given what we now know about how this case was investigated and not investigated, for him to literally say on national TV, nah, not so much. I would work this case just the same way I'd work every other case, just like I do every other case. Every other defendant, every other defense attorney who has represented a defendant in which Michael Proctor has touched a piece of evidence should be clamoring for some sort of habeas corpus, some sort of retrial, some sort of redo, if you will, in Massachusetts. He is a disaster in terms of an investigator, an absolute abject disaster. For him to say, maybe I should have looked at another car, maybe I should have interviewed a couple of witnesses. Are you kidding? He acts like it's an afterthought. That is your job, sir. Do your job. Do your duty. You're supposed to be an objective finder of fact and then present those facts to a prosecutor who then presents those facts to a jury. None of that happened. None of what I just described happened. And that is day one in law school. That's day one. You learn that.
How's Karen Reed doing right now?
Phenomenal. She is the toughest woman I know. She has a steel spine. She's got no quit. She's never given up. I think, we're all in a position right now. We've lived in the pressure cooker of the last 3 years of this onerous draconian system that's tried to break her and beat her down. And we've all sort of been through it. Nobody as much as she has. And I think she's just processing what it feels like to be, a truly free woman. She's buoyed by the tens of thousands, millions of supporters who have raised their voices in defense of her. And that's where she gives the credit. Look, we all worked really hard, including her. By the way, she's the unsung hero of the defense team. she's as good a lawyer as I've ever seen. And I've seen some damn good lawyers. She's as good as I've ever seen strategically, attention to detail.
You could feel that the lawyers felt that way about Karen Read throughout the process, not just how they spoke about her, but how they treated her in the courtroom. It's very different, right? I've had some clients that want to be involved, some that don't, some that should be involved, some that shouldn't. The way he talks about her is not common. I'll just say not common of how lawyers usually talk about their clients.
Finding the evidence, finding the details, and exploiting those details and exploring those details in a courtroom. She's as good as it gets. But I think now she wants to take a beat, take a breath. She never wanted to be a lawyer. She never wanted to be in this position. I think she's probably going to a little separation from the justice system.
I hope she gets her job back at Fidelity. Alan Jackson, I'm so appreciative of you coming on and give our best to Karen. And I hope next month when you come back, you can come in and spend like an hour with us talking about this case.
I'd love to. That's a gentleman's invitation. I will take you up on that.
Okay, I'll be in touch with you in about.
All right. I mean, that was a great interview. That's a great interview right there. I'm sure there'll be more from the lawyers coming. I know Ian Runkle of the Bailey is having Alessi and Yannetti on. I think that probably is happening before you guys see this video from when I'm recording it. But he mentioned Proctor and the Proctor interviews. Let's talk about some of what Michael Proctor had to say now. So I've seen a couple different, versions and breakdowns and clips of Proctor's interview. And I just want to talk through some of the quotes, okay? Because some of these quotes tell you so much about what's going on in his mind. And we heard from Mr. Reed, Karen Reed's father, the other day about how they wanted the media and the public to pick this up and how that made such a big difference in this case, with Turtle Boy and others blasting it out there, getting everybody in the world to know about this case. So the McCabes and Alberts and Proctor now are doing this PR tour, and I'm wondering if they're thinking the same thing. The problem is you have to know how the media, or have an idea about how the media is actually going to react to this. And maybe there were some missteps with, Reed's plans and interviews and certain things like that. But generally speaking, I think the public saw it the way that she saw it, or hoped that they would see it. I'm not so sure it's going to go the same with Proctor and the McCabes and the Alberts that are going on their media tour now. Similarly, how Paul O'Keefe did interviews after trial number 1. We haven't really heard much since, but Proctor said that the people on Karen Reed's side are the loud minority and that the truth in their side is the silent majority. I find that hard to believe based on what we're seeing and hearing, even in the town and locally with the local, people and media and things like that. But that's what he says. And I guess we'll find out, because the loud minority usually loses over the silent majority eventually, right? Especially, when things end up coming to a head. So we'll see. He was asked how evidence keeps appearing. And he said something like, well, Alan Jackson must not have read my weather reports because, it was snowing and then melting and evidence was unearthing and revealing itself, which I found interesting. He also said that, the no nudes so far, and a lot of those text messages were jokes and they're regrettable, but he doesn't know any other officers that have been disciplined for their personal text messages, and he plans on appealing his termination. We'll see how that goes for him. But it seems like some cracks in the armor, right? Like some people turning on each other inside there, which leads me to something the McCabes and Albert said and Proctor said. It's like, if there's 30 to 50 people in this conspiracy, how's nobody turning on each other? How's nobody cracking? And it's a good point, right? Could be true, but it also could be that all the decision makers and arrests and charges and prosecutions, maybe they're all in on it too. Conspiracies usually start with people not turning on each other, but will there be pressure? Will there actually be a federal prosecution that Alan Jackson, just said they punted? Will they reopen that? They absolutely could. Nothing is stopping them. No announcement that they made is going to stop them if they want to. And will that cause people to crack or turn? I don't know. And if one person turns and says something, is Proctor and McCabe's and Albert's all going to say, okay, well, now it's true? I don't think so. Proctor also, while Jackson took some shots at Proctor took some shots at Jackson. He's like, oh yeah? You think I planted evidence? You had me on the stand for 2 days, sir. Why didn't you ask me then? Because it's not true. It's like, settle down, Proctor. Let me be the lawyer if I'm Alan Jackson. Me asking you, did you plant this evidence, and you saying no does not help my case. Why would I do that? I think we all remember how that cross-examination went, and it wasn't good for Proctor. It was so bad that the Commonwealth decided not to call him in trial too, and basically apologized for him. Proctor also agreed that there was police corruption in this world. How can he say there's not? but not here, not in this case. It's like, well, Sandra Birchmore's case seems pretty obvious. What do you think about some of the crossover that might be there and here? He talked about losing his job and how sad it was and how he cried when he had to turn over his uniforms. I agree, that is really sad, but it's based on your actions, right? The damage done to you is based on your actions, number one. But a lot of the damage done to Karen Read was at least partially your actions, right? You can say her drinking and driving led to a lot of this. Maybe some of the statements she made led to a lot of this. But Proctor is reaping what he sowed purely. And it's sad. And sometimes when people get the consequences of their actions, it's really sad. That's why I say give people grace. And I try to do the best I can at that. There are consequences to your actions. And when they hit, sometimes they are really sad. But I also think that some of the comments he makes, which I'll talk about right now, I think it's probably a good thing he's not a cop anymore. When asked, what would you do differently? He said, maybe now that I know it's so high profile, maybe I'd look at some of the other cars just to say I did it. And maybe, not for sure, but maybe I would look at some of the interview, or I would interview certain witnesses earlier. It's like, you think? And he finished it off with, we handled it like we handle every investigation, basically. No real apologies. What I would have liked to hear him say is, and maybe would have added to some credibility there, is I wish we would have taken the pictures of that taillight the first time we saw that car, because then you'd all know I was right. I wish we would have had body cameras and recorded all those interviews, because you know what I put in my report was right. I wish I would have documented everything perfectly the way we should have, and we just didn't. I wish we should have. We didn't, because of the weather, the chaos, the fear, the sadness, everything that was going on. We didn't. We should have, because then you would all know everything I did was right. And I wish the stinking cameras would have worked in the Sally Port, because then you all would have saw I never went anywhere near, didn't touch that taillight. And that taillight looked exactly like it did the day I saw it after Karen Read hit John O'Keefe with the Lexus, and that would have confirmed it. That would have maybe made me think, interesting. Maybe you still don't believe him, but at least that would have made sense. At least you admit the documentation was just woefully short in this case. He didn't. He won't. He refuses to. And that's why I would be pretty scared to have him on any case if I was a citizen in that jurisdiction. Let me see if there's anything else. It didn't happen. There's no evidence of it. Talking about the corruption. Oh, and like the C-word text and some of the nastier texts. It's like, well, my feelings toward Karen Read developed as the investigation went on, which really doesn't seem true when you look at the timeline of when the texts were sent and what was sent in those texts, and when he believed she did it and was going to make sure she was going to catch some serious charges, and nobody else inside the house was going to catch any charges because they were cops. That happened relatively quickly, not as the investigation went on. And again, the lack of interviews and lack of documentation didn't happen as the investigation went on. That's a problem. And then we get to kind of the McCabes and the Alberts. They echoed a lot of what Proctor said about the fact that there's no evidence of it. We didn't do it. We can't believe people believe it. Most people don't believe it, but this is what happens when it's twisted. They eventually get to how sad it is for the O'Keefes. They've been called killers themselves, meaning the McCabes and the Alberts. Interesting point that Brian Higgins wasn't there. Is it still a united front? Is there some issues there? I don't know. I found that interesting that Brian Higgins wasn't there. 30 to 50 people would have been involved. And then here were some of the unbelievable things they said. Number one, the criminal justice system failed us as the witnesses. And you better think about this before you're ever a witness in a case. Imagine that coming from cops and first responders and city council members and soccer moms. You see something bad happen, don't go be a witness for fear that something may happen to you. Don't do the right thing for fear that something may happen to you, because if they believe they're right and they believe in truth and justice, if you believe in truth, right, and you have beliefs, whether it's religious beliefs, political beliefs, whatever it may be, whatever you find to be very important to you, like I find my religious beliefs, people are not going to like you because of that. People may come at you. They may hate you. They may stop listening. They may stop caring. They may think you're an idiot. They may think you're a jerk. If you have strongly held beliefs and you think what you're doing is right, you do it and you deal with the consequences. You deal with things that you believe to be untruths and injustice in the world for truth and justice. You have to stand up for what you believe is right. So to tell people to cower and now be witnesses because don't go be witnesses if you see a crime committed or can help somebody in need or can help a victim, don't do it because of this. Man, is that misguided. That's not doing what I think you're trying to do publicly. I really didn't appreciate that comment personally for people that should be witnesses in the future. You should. You see something, you should say something, and you should be willing to stand on business, as they say, and go to court and testify to it. And it should be pretty hard for defense lawyers to point the finger at you and call you, say that you committed crimes, right? That shouldn't just be something easy that happens to a lot of witnesses. And then they said, why didn't you go outside? I'm not a Canton police officer. I'm a Boston police officer. That's what he led with. That's why he didn't go outside and help as a first responder. And then I was just woken up. By the time I got downstairs, there were already cops inside my house. There was nothing I could do. That doesn't seem to be the truth based on Jen McCabe's timeline and the butt dials. Seems like they could have been out there before the cops were inside their house by basically everybody's timeline. And then they also said something like, well, they knew where Chloe was. They could have matched Chloe's DNA to the dog DNA or to John O'Keefe easily, and they chose not to, once again, put that burden on the defense, not on law enforcement, not on the Commonwealth. I don't think this beginning of this PR tour for the McCabes and Alberts and Proctor is going well personally. You guys let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments with that. So that's what I've been sent so far. There could be more. Maybe we'll have another clip and add to this. Maybe we'll have more that has to do with these interviews because we still have basically all day on Friday. So I'll see what pops up. But that's all I've got for now. So this might be the end of the video. It might not. I don't even know. So how could you possibly know? So stick around until the outro's after to see if there's anything else. But this may be all we have until sometime that maybe very soon. I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.